Welcome to Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich. This is episode 11.
Wow.
Here we go. Please follow us at Earl, EHRL Bottom Line, at Bob_Ehrlich, and at Kendall Ehrlich.
Hi. I like your black, by the way.
Well, we're a
I
little
like that.
we're a little more casual today,
are.
but it's our podcast. We can go with it.
Exactly.
So
I didn't get
it's
the
good.
memo on
And
the
you're
Under Armour,
the
though.
pro police, blue on your
Absolutely.
flag. Love that.
So before we get to the real substantive stuff this week, we talked a little bit about last week, the award shows in Hollywood and the messaging from the progressives and the woke crowd, and the fact that a lot of ratings have been down in professional sports, clearly Grammys, Oscars, the whole 9 yards. Well, guess what, dear? I don't think you saw this yet, but ratings, the initial ratings from last night came out. We're taping this on a Monday. The Oscars was last night. Last year, 23 million viewers. This year, under 10 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a wow.
Well, I think people have had it in many respects. We talked about it last week. We like people to stick to their professions, and people have just had too much with everybody feeling like they can say whatever they want, and there's no ramifications. And I think there's ramifications for all of it, and this is part of it.
Well, some people don't want to go to the movies anymore. Some people don't want to watch LeBron James on NBA games anymore. Some people still will not go back to watching the NFL. Obviously, MLB with the All-Star game. So we probably should devote maybe an entire show to this, but I did want to run that number by you. This is a dramatic, over 50% decrease in 1 year. This is big time.
Well, and it was a
Jerry Springer reruns get better numbers than this.
It was a bad year for the movies because people couldn't go to the movies.
That's true.
And also, again, the Oscars keeps getting more and more esoteric with their choices and who's nominated, and there's controversy here, there, and everywhere.
And Netflix is taking over the world, right?
Right, and there's different platforms now. So you have more choices, more streaming, places that you can view what you like to view. So it's going to be rough for Hollywood, I think. There could be a real change in how movies are viewed.
Nobody is shedding a tear. Speaking of not changing, you may have missed this first issue this week. Oregon official talks about permanent mask. Permanent, my dear. After the shots, after herd immunity, permanent mask in the state of Oregon. Again, early on, we talked about whether President Biden, President Trump, Dr. Fauci, whomever, it didn't really matter, CDC, we had no idea, the experts had no idea. They were all over the map with regard to masking, unmasking, social distancing, non-social distancing, inside, outside,
not touching,
surfaces, the whole 9 yards.
Surfaces.
After the first 3 to 6 months, it became pretty clear with regard to outside, although, again, the expert testimony, the expert recommendations were all over the board. And we've seen wide differences with respect to governors. One of your favorite governors, DeSantis in Florida, obviously
right.
Texas, a lot of red states, particularly outside, opening up.
Right.
Blue states, not so much.
Or allowing businesses to figure it out, to use when they finally got to, okay, we're going to mask and social distance. But in the beginning, nobody knew anything. And it was all over the map, as you said. Fauci just became in love with Fauci. And unfortunately, he had a nightly platform. The unfortunate thing is that science really got a bad rap.
Yeah.
Because
I'm just sitting here
you
laughing.
and I grew up with science gave you facts.
Yeah.
And science was the measurement that you could count on. And that
Objective.
real scientists were objective. And they were able to determine things through experimentation and real things. What
I'm laughing because we've been talking about it. We saw it in the fall when the Big Ten, some of the big conferences played. We saw it during the winter when the NCAA went back to basketball. We've really seen it this spring with baseball. And obviously we have a son playing college football. He just finished. But it kills me. The coaches wear their masks and then they yell at the players. And then the players play, particularly a game like football or basketball, where they're in each other's faces without masks, the whole 9 yards. And then they go to the sidelines, and what do? They put their mask on. Now, where's the science? Tell me the science. Tell me the scientist that thinks that's good practice.
And we saw that last summer.
Yeah.
2020 during the summer. Our kid was in a league that the kids were all over each other. And the referees were right there too, by the way. And they got bumped and probably accidentally spit on or whatever. Yeah. And
dirty balls and dirty gyms.
Right. Well, outdoors. We were outdoors, though. We were outdoors.
But how about last fall? We were also indoors in AAU tournaments.
Well, that's right.
It's just particularly with regard to outdoors. Now, I understand the other day, Dr. Fauci came out with, yes, it looks as though you're pretty safe outdoors without masks. And it's just, at some point, the common sense of the American people has to take hold, even in blue states. Because for the most part, it's been red state governors, red state executives coming out with, let's look at the science, follow the science, and the science says, with regard to outside, we're pretty good.
Well, let me just add this, that now our local schools here in Maryland are sending out feelers regarding, okay, they're going to try to teach 4 days a week. I don't understand if you go back for 4 days, why you can't go back for 5 days. Parents, I think, have had it. I think they want their kids back in school like 5 days a week. The one thing we've talked about here. And the socialization of our kids is actually a pretty good way to socialize them. Because we've seen the negative effects of not having them get together, of not having them be in the classroom. Please, get them back to school. Figure it out 5 days a week. And kids should be playing sports and the band plays. And extracurricular, whatever it may be. But I'm telling you, if we don't do that by the fall, China will be laughing even louder.
Well, they're laughing pretty loud now. Now, with regard to what's occurred in the dichotomy between red and blue, conservative, liberal, science, non-science, if you will, we have seen, and I think this is on the upside, quite frankly, we have seen this authoritarian streak among blue state governors and executives. And even in blue states, people are saying, enough. You talk about the science. We want to follow the science, so follow the science.
Well, the other thing is, it's like, we need you to get your vaccine. We need your vaccine. We're seeing commercials about the vaccine. And, okay, so we're going to get the vaccine. But then they say, okay, well, now you still have to be masked, and you still can't eat inside.
So why get the vaccine?
And you can't do this, and you can't do that. So everybody's raising their hands up as the goalpost gets pushed further and further back.
This is where people power, voter power comes. Doesn't matter what you are, liberal, conservative, right, left, moderate, in the middle, who cares? But you do care about getting back to normal. We have a right to get back to normal. We have a right to expect to get back to normal. We have a right to expect our leaders to want us to get back to normal. And that's not the case in Oregon. And it's not the case with this authoritarian streak.
It's not the case in California.
Very progressive governors and executives. And that's very clear.
And it definitely falls in party line.
Yep, pretty much. Now, issue 2. I feel like a broken record, but every week...
Well, we have to talk about it.
We have to talk about it. It's now officially, by the way, according to the polls, Pew and others, the number one issue in the country. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about chaos at the southern border. True chaos at the southern border. Gratuitous, and I'll say gratuitous chaos at the southern border, point we made last week, that because Trump did X, the Biden administration was going to do Y. Because Trump did no more catch and release, no. Bottom line, it's the opposite. With regard to stay in Mexico, the opposite. With regard to empowering ICE, the opposite. With regard to building the wall, the opposite. If Trump did it, the Biden administration is going to say no. And unfortunately, that has resulted in an absolute mess. We've talked about the drug situation. We've talked about the sex trafficking. Now, supposedly, 31 days ago, now I guess 32 days ago, the vice president was placed in charge of the border. She's yet to go down there.
To be there.
And the press keeps asking her, and she says she's not going to play games. She's running this through her diplomatic routes. According to her, it's a
stalemate. She is stalling. She does not want to go to that border. She's been told that, I'm sure, by the group that is running the country, because it's certainly not the president making these decisions. And I think it's really important. We here in Maryland, local sheriff Mike Lewis went to the border with a group of sheriffs to see things firsthand and to start thinking about, what other jurisdictions can help in this. Not to mention, as we've talked about, the human trafficking issues, the drug issues. This is going to have a very long-term effect if we don't get a grip. Not just changing the numbers and changing the country, but the impact, the negative impact on the human trafficking side, on the drug side, on the overdose impact. It's just...
Now, you're talking about real serious issues here. There's another lighter, but an issue, nevertheless, concern here, which is, this is all over the news today. It seems these packets that the kids are given when they cross over, some of those packets contained a child's book authored by the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Harris, for the migrant children. They're in their welcome packs. The administration claims it did not know who made this decision. Somebody made this decision. Somebody bought those books. Let's find out.
Wow, so she's financially gaining?
I don't know.
Nobody
knows anything so far. We have to find out.
And yet she won't go to the border. So as they come over the border, they get her book in their packet. What else is in the packet?
Even if it's a mistake, who thinks like this? Who thought that was a good idea?
Wow.
To place that book in the welcome pack. So here's a couple numbers for you to not sleep on tonight because it'll keep you up. The Border Patrol now estimates that it will encounter, now this is not new migrants in the country, but it will encounter 2 million migrants attempting to enter the U.S. this year. That's more than the populations of Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming from reports. Just think about that.
Wow.
Also, Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas. A lot of Democrats are impacted by this. A lot of the constituents in members' districts, Democratic districts, are complaining to their members that they feel unsafe. This is a problem. Do something about it. Where's the administration? Where's the president? Where's the vice president?
Property rights issues, safety along the border, ranches along the border,
schools,
vandalism.
social services, right? So he was associated with this comment. He's concerned about the fast tracking of migrants, where they basically, on the honor system, just send you into the country. Typically 2,000 a month. In March, 15,300 on the honor system. Yeah, here your papers show up now in a couple months or a year, whenever it happens to be. It's the honor system. We trust you. Oh my gosh.
Come on in. And that means that we don't have a country. I mean, when you don't have a value in citizenship, then you don't have a country.
When you don't have a border, you do not have a sovereign country. When you don't have a sense of a common culture. We've talked about this in the past. And by the way, we celebrate multiculturalism in the sense of different cultures coming here. We celebrate all the different ethnicities and races and assimilation. That's what it's all about. That's why our country is so great. That's what we've always celebrated until the last couple of years. But the goal has always been a common American culture that we all participate in.
English
That's the social contract. That's what the country's all about. That's the American social contract. By the way, that's the social contract of every country.
Exactly.
Or you don't have a country.
Try to go to Mexico.
You don't have a sovereign. And they have,
seriously.
What? You told me this week they have photo ID to vote, right?
They do. Can you believe that?
I don't know what to believe these days. The bottom line is this is a crisis. I don't care what the White House says. This is a situation out of control. No one's taking responsibility for it. By the way, it's hurting the president in the polls. So maybe he may act finally. And Democrats' leadership in Congress may act because the American public, red and blue, are saying do something about it now. This is a true crisis. I don't care what rhetorical constructs you want to come up with in Washington. Right here at the border, as our buddy the Sheriff Lewis talked about, this is a real problem.
Real. Very real.
So issue 3.
So many issues regarding that. That's why we need to keep talking about it.
Yeah,
we need to be talking about it, and we know that you're concerned about it, and so that's why we do it.
Yep. Issue 3 is the least surprising issue we've discussed now in our 11th show, but it is real, and Mrs. Kendel Ehrlich has been involved in the criminal justice system from the jump. You began as a public defender. You've been a drug court prosecutor, obviously a public defender when we met.
I've been a juvenile prosecutor.
Drug court prosecutor.
Misdemeanor, district court.
Deputy drug czar for the good old USA. I mean, this is your resume. It screams, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to police, law enforcement, drugs, contraband, etc. So here's the headline.
Well, the system.
The system.
Yeah, I believe in the system. I've loved it.
Yeah, I know you have.
And it is, they're destroying it. Is what they're doing. Or attempting.
There is a real essential group, part of that system, the police, the blue. Police recruiting issues, applicants down in many states, many subdivisions, many jurisdictions.
Well, we'll give
the least surprising headline this week.
Yeah, give some of the numbers.
Well, in Philadelphia, 288 vacancies and growing. The state of New Jersey in a recruiting crisis, per the Police Benevolent Association president. In Baltimore, patrolled now under 700, 300 to 400 under what it should be on the streets of Baltimore, one of the most dangerous cities in the world, in fact. And of course, nobody should be surprised. You have the fund movement. You have no backup from Soros-sponsored and elected prosecutors. Nobody's talking about that. You have liability shields now being pierced by legislatures. You have woke media. You have celebrities vilifying the blue. You have threats of riots. And we're going to talk about this guy in Portland next week, this mayor who did not allow, who's finally, by the way, after 11 months now said, I've had enough. I've had enough of the riots. But he's the same guy 3-4 months ago said, by the way, police, you can't use certain tear gas in trying to control the riots in our once beautiful city. Portland was once a beautiful city not so long ago. So you have this combination of cultural events. You have this celebrities now grabbing onto the anti-police thought process. And as a result, you have less good people, and I want to talk about this for a second too, babe. Not just people going into the police academies. You're probably going to have a diminution in quality because if you're coming out of the military, you're 15 years, 20 years, you're coming from one police agency to another, and you're seeing, should I stay in law enforcement? Maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. They're going to pierce my liability shield. Are you kidding me?
And they're legislating it. And I want to talk a little bit about the prosecutors.
Yeah.
So I don't always recommend PBS, but I do recommend this
hardly ever
one series coming out of PBS right now called Philly DA. This is probably, along with the California DA, Los Angeles DA, the most progressive in the country. And it is really interesting, and I highly recommend people watch this because it shows you the mindset. First of all, his background was as a civil rights criminal defense attorney for decades, 30 years before he ran. He is a Soros-backed DA, like Los Angeles, like Baltimore. Baltimore.
I think Chicago, too.
Chicago is absolutely right. Seattle. And these people are elected. Many people don't even really know what a prosecutor does. You know, they know that the prosecutor obviously is a law enforcement, head of the law enforcement agency of that jurisdiction. But I don't think they really recognize some of the impact of what a prosecutor brings, what kind of relationships necessary with the police, how the courthouse is run, what happens,
what kind of policies
what happens if the police feel like the prosecutors don't have their back. And when they have to go into court in very tough jurisdictions where it's tough, really tough to find a witness for a case or to put a case together, to convince a unanimous jury, and then you're fighting the prosecutor's office. I mean, why would people sign up for something that they not only face a very uncertain criminal element out there on the street, very raw, very tenuous, very dangerous. I was just going to say that, dangerous. Not just the violence of guns and knives, but the drugs, being poked with something with fentanyl, being thrown fentanyl, which can kill you in an instant. So much that's being faced. And of course, the domestic calls are always the most violent, always terrible to
every police officer will tell you that.
Take a warrant to a house It's a very dangerous situation. So you try to get people so highly trained in that. And then they come to court and their very own people that are supposed to be supporting them and assisting them through trial. And, the police aren't lawyers. They're not experts in trial. It needs to be teamwork in that situation. And this show is really fascinating because it shows that it is a direct undermine of the police. Are there bad police? Of course there are. Do they need more training? Yes. There are many ways to skin the cat. And what you see is that there is a totally adverse relationship, which should not be. It should be, how can we join together?
It's a team. It's supposed to be a team.
And make these streets safer for everybody to get along. And the arrogance of this DA and the just how straightforward he is. And then something that you and I talk about in our crazy wild lives. We actually talk about this stuff, but where's the victim in this? And a couple of the career prosecutors in this show, there's pushback because they say, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to tell the victim that comes in here that had a gun pointed at their head and they were robbed that it's really just a theft and a little assault. It's no big deal. She said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm a prosecutor. And there are ways to do it. Listen, I believe in drug courts. I believe in specialty courts. I believe in giving people assistance. I believe that they work. They can really help at the core of the problem. I get that. Many people buy into that, but there's many ways to skin this cat much more creatively than being a progressive, adversarial way to do it. It needs to come together. Are there bad police? Of course there are. Are there other ways to do it? Now, Philadelphia it illustrates that apparently they had a real tough prosecutor wanting to put everybody behind the bars for the maximum. And this is maybe a reaction to that. This is way too far in the other side of the pendulum.
So you have a number of these issues that are not parenthetical. They're collateral, but they're directly related to this whole mess we have with the criminal justice system. One is there has to be teamwork. The prosecutors and the cops have to cooperate. Everybody's seen all the TV shows, right? Your favorite show in the world, right?
Okay, I've seen every Law and Order lots of times over. I swear,
Every
all 20
You're
seasons.
not the only one, though. You're not the only one. So, but they have to work as a team, or you miss your prosecution, right? Secondly, victims. No one's talking about the victims.
No one.
Nobody is talking about victims are not sexy anymore. Nobody wants to talk about the victims. And in every crime, there is a victim, but nobody cares a whit about victims, it appears these days, because you see no discourse.
And we all know, by the way, that in these major cities, it's black on black crime. It is black children dying on the streets. And no one seems to care. That's what gets me.
And you're absolutely correct. And the kids... And the third issue is the recruiting. Again, not just the fact of the recruiting and the numbers are down and the spots are open, but also the quality of the people you want becoming police officers. We have a ton of police friends, white, black, Republican, Democrat, mostly Republican, but a few Democrats. A lot of them have worked for us, federal, state, all sorts of different agencies. They're really concerned about this because a lot of young people will not go into this profession given the situation as it exists today.
And like the fire department, the police department in particular is often family, handed down from generation to generation. People that really, really heartfelt feel the aspect of service, and they give that to the next generation, and so that will stop, and that is really a shame. Because I think it's really important. I'm thinking of Blue Bloods.
And how I was thinking of Blue Bloods too, because
they all sit around the table.
Your mother-in-law, my mother,
I watched
taught
too much television
to love that show.
I need small kids again.
Tom Selleck is a Republican, so we like him.
I might watch a little too much television, but at any rate, I think that the generations just won't be there, and there's something to be said for that in learning from one another within those generations, and it makes me sad.
Last issue this week, we're going to switch gears here and go foreign policy. I saw this little tidbit. Just the UN, of course, the UN is now empowered under the Biden administration. UN puts Iranian regime, the world's most notorious sponsor of state power, by the way, notorious sponsor of terrorism, I should say, on Women's Rights Commission. On the Women's Rights Commission. Where are the howls of protest?
Where's Hillary on that?
Where's Hillary Clinton? Where are the feminists? Where are the howls of protest from the human rights advocates? Where are the howls of protest from the Biden administration? It's just crazy. But again, the UN is empowered. There's crickets, by the way. The answer is crickets from all three. With regard to Iran, and we're going to talk about this more next week. With regard to Iran, the president's relentless pressure, particularly economic sanctions, relentless pressure spoke to American policy, which was regime change, not through war. And it was working big time. The Iranian street unrest, the economy in tatters. The mullahs really worried. But now, guess what? Joe Biden, what is the American policy today? What's the posture of American policy today with regard to Iran? And are we listening to John Kerry, who's been wrong on every major foreign policy issue over the last 15 years, as has Joe Biden?
Well, you could bring in James Taylor.
I forgot about James.
Yeah, we could bring in Taylor. I'm sure he'll write a song about it.
Well,
that's terrible. Actually, you shouldn't even laugh about that because it's so serious, and it's so important to have a real policy. And Trump got so
he was making
made fun
progress
of because he
was ostracized by the foreign policy establishment
right.
and the John Kerrys of the world.
Right,
So
because he put America first.
So
and he wasn't taking planes of money over there.
10 years remaining, even though I'm flying private jets around the world. Secretary Kerry. We're going to be talking more about him and how wrong he's been with regard to Iran and specific issues with regard to Israel and other Arab states in the Middle East. We'll talk about that next week. So tune into our show. The really difficult thing these days, everyone, is just to figure out what 4 or 5 issues we can talk about, because we could go on for hours. Sounds like our home, basically, with our kids, talking about these issues, watching mostly Fox, obviously Tucker Carlson, someone we really have great regard for, but also Laura Ingraham and Sean, but not just Fox. We need to talk about these issues. The midterms are a year and a half away. There's a lot of bad happening in our country. We're going in the wrong direction, but only those midterms are going to fix part of it. So we need to focus on that, and we will over the coming months. So we really do appreciate you listening to our views, our show, the Ehrlichs on everything, and we wish you Godspeed.
Thanks so much for listening to Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich, and we'll talk to you next time.